So hey guys, and welcome back to part 2 here on the Shredding Skeptic, where we're going to be looking once again at Empyrion Galactic survival and talking a little bit about base building and getting our first small space vessel in the air. So as you can see, we've done a few upgrades to the base here, including building this nice advanced constructor with some advanced ingots I managed to steal from an enemy base. So let's get this guy fired up and go over some of the basic components you're going to need for your first small space vessel. So you're going to need an ammo box for your weapons, which is, again, that special block that's going to hold on to all of your rockets and bullets. I like to always have an oxygen station on board, as well as a small constructor that will allow you to, again, build the necessary components you need while you're in the field, as well as mine some of that ore down to the ingot stage to save yourself a little bit of time later. Also, we got our farm fully set up here, so what we're going with is these sort of blocks of 9 and 1 light for each, and that's enough to get them all growing at the same speed. You can find all the necessary recipes in your food processor, and I find that the canned food is probably going to be your best bet, as it does tend to stay, well, I guess as fresh as canned food can be for the longest amount of time. But you should probably just keep all that stuff in the fridge so that it doesn't actually decay at all. So let's head out of the atmosphere and do a little bit of casual asteroid mining. Now, as you guys can see, Empyrion Galactic survival certainly looks a lot different than it did a couple of versions ago. They've definitely done a lot to polish up the look on the planet, but unfortunately some of these space to planet transitions are still a little bit choppy, not quite as smooth as, say, Elite Dangerous or Star Citizen, well, I guess whenever that actually works for the rest of us. But that's okay, because I find it's kind of an interesting process to watch this game be built in real time and see this thing from an early access stage, and I'm really curious as to how different it will look in the end and how it'll compare to some of the other games. Now, I think the key element to what these space sims and space survival sims are really going for is this idea of both isolated exploration as well as an ability to express one's own creativity. The ability to build your hover and spacecraft directly from scratch is something that I find to be a lot of fun. It definitely takes a lot of time to get the kind of look and functionality that you want. And for the capital vessel episode that we have coming up next, I actually just used a blueprint, which you guys will see, but having to build them in survival mode does require a lot of mining, and we're going to show a bit of that today, but I don't want to get into too much of it because it does get kind of boring. What doesn't get boring, though, are the really weird and fascinating things that happen to the human mind when you exist in a state of isolation, either completely by yourself or with a group of people, like the kind of stuff you would see in like an overwinter period in Antarctica where the scientists have to stay down there for the entire time, and some really weird things can start happening to these people. Now, before we dive in too much into that, I want to show you guys these automated mining machines that will allow you to offload a little bit of that boring work to some of these, well, machines. Don't laugh, they're probably coming for all of our jobs too. So let's talk a little bit about what happens when you run out of external stimuli that really keeps your mind occupied. You have to see that as humans evolved over the years, we've always faced these sort of existential threats for food and survival and all this other stuff, but once all of that is taken care of, what tends to happen is our attention begins to turn inward. And for many, this may be a territory that is as foreign as the land from which we are currently mining spaceship materials. Many have described it as an almost altered state of consciousness where you start to question everything. Every little creak or sound has a meaning attached to it that may be far beyond the reality of the situation. Without other people around to sort of bounce these reactions off of, it becomes very difficult to resolve any kind of ambiguity. You also have the changing of sleep patterns and appetite, and frankly, you can lose track of time altogether. If you happen to be experiencing isolation in groups, then what you can find is that every little mannerism becomes just this intolerant grating on your soul that you just can't seem to get over. And this is just the unfortunate reality of what happens when people become isolated within small groups. So we're going to keep ourselves occupied on the planet here by going out and doing a little bit of hunting and recovery of some meat and milk that we can turn into cheese with the milk and the meat can actually be turned into 4 different kinds of processed meat after the fact, like steak, salami, ham, or ribs, and you can actually use these in other recipes as well. Now, you can just eat the raw ingredients if you want, but you can actually pack a lot more calories into some of the higher-end recipes so that you can take up fewer storage units in a portable fridge, for instance. I think that's sort of the incentive. And if you get a lot of the more advanced ingredients together, you can recreate some of those emergency ration packets, which of course have the most amount of calories in them and they never actually go stale. So they're sort of an ideal unit for this game, but you're going to have to work a bit to get some of those. Next up, we're going to do a quick little exploration of the middle section of this Crash Titan to see if we can find any useful materials. Now, by this stage in the game, unless they have some of the more advanced ingots that I would need to travel to the other side of the galaxy for, there's probably not going to be a lot in here that I can use, but I think it's worth taking a look anyway, because you never know. Now, not all of these encounters go so smoothly. Sometimes you do encounter resistance from some enemy turrets, and my poorly defended space vessel here was shot down, unfortunately. So, the way I design these things is so they can sort of fit together as 2 pieces, and I can just drag one back, so I don't have to just build a second space vessel. So that's sort of what we're doing here with this block hook that I've put on the back. There is also a way of upgrading the paneling on your vessels so that they can take a few more hits. By getting some of the more advanced constructors, you can get hardened steel plates that you can use to upgrade the ship. Now, I was kind of wondering how the developers were going to put this in so you didn't have to basically rebuild the thing one at a time. But with your repairing and upgrade tool, you can just hold shift and right click on one of the panels, and as long as you have the hardened steel plates in your inventory, it'll just upgrade the damage resistance of the panels. Now, unfortunately, I'm losing the space vessel a little bit here, and yeah, she's gonna roll. So we're gonna have to do some quick repairs here so that I can get both of these vehicles back in one shot and I don't have to make 2 separate trips around the planet. It may seem silly, but I am rather fond of my prototype vehicles, and I would rather not have to start again from scratch with completely new blocks and everything, so I'd rather just take these things both back and get them the fixin' they need. So, now that we have both of the vehicles more or less built and set up and the base is good to go, it's probably time to start work on our capital vessel. So, again, the first thing we're going to need is about 12,000 ingots of iron, which is a lot. So you're going to have to be digging out quite a large quantity of ore, as you can see here, and we're just going to speed it up because, again, this process, although somewhat hypnotic, can be a little bit tedious at times. So as you can see, our Tier 2 drill is making light work of this cavity of iron ore, and it's allowed us to make a few different upgrades to our space vessel here. So we've thrown a couple of extra Gatling guns on the outside there for a little more frontal firepower, just in case we need it as we take a little trip over to the Talon Guardian village. Which brings me to the final and most interesting point about life in isolation. One can begin to sense presences or almost see ghosts. It's a way that our mind kind of trips us out. High levels of stress experienced by people like mountain climbers or Arctic explorers, they tend to report experiences of hallucinations. So I wanted to pay a little visit to these guys over here to, well, see if they would attack me first of all, and, well, they don't seem to mind me being here, and to see if they have anything of value, which they do not. So be forewarned as to the dangers of living a life of isolation, as you may find yourself visited by spirits from the past, or other beings incorporeal, and I'd encourage you to tune into next week's episode where we're going to take our first capital ship out for its maiden voyage to perhaps escape the life of isolation on this weird-ass planet. Once again, I am Shredder Steve, the Shredding Skeptic, and I'll see you next time.